again, thank you for joining me at the May 11th, 2020 Readfield Town Meeting. And again, we're operating this meeting with the use of Zoom technology by necessity. So we can't gather in one place with the proper distancing and so forth. So we will start with the minutes of the Select Board meeting from April 27th, 2020. Do I have a motion in regards to that, or any discussion up front on the corrections that need to go into a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the Select Board meeting minutes of April 27th, 2020.
And is there a second on that?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, by the adopted laws on the using this kind of meeting format, I need to call a roll. So it's Woodson.
Yes.
Sammons.
Yes.
Price.
Yes.
And I will vote yes. I don't think we have Mr. Eno with us quite yet. We're trying to get him linked up with us. We'll proceed with warrants 47 and 48. Chris?
Okay, we have vendors warrant is $461,116. Payroll was $14,527.29 for a total of $475,643.29. There's a couple biggies, which is the school district. Cushing's last payment for road snow removal. $84,916 for the fire station addition. And that's about the big ones.
Okay, are there any questions? Now we affect this warrant by simply signing it according to, again, the new rules. We don't actually do a motion and a vote on it in a remote meeting.
And I have reviewed it and signed it, so you guys can go in and sign it.
Okay. So the initial review by Chris was done. She just shared some information. Are there any additional questions regarding the treasurer's warrant?
I have one question. It's semi-related, and this is for Eric. If we had had plowable snow the other night, what would have been our situation with Cushing? Because I believe his duties ended at the end of April. Is that correct?
You need to unmute, Eric.
Spacebar wasn't working. Yeah, so technically that would end at the end of April, but the expectation is that he would be able to provide that additional service for us. So we would have likely negotiated something. I would have reviewed the contract, but my expectation is that he probably would have just done it for us.
Great. Thank you for that information.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll proceed on to Select Board communications. Do any members of the Select Board have anything they would like to share with us this evening? Dennis, go ahead, please.
I just want to talk a little bit about Heritage Days, if
Please
possible. We are still planning to have some kind of acknowledgement of Heritage Days. However, most likely it will be scaled down. And we probably will have to adjust a lot of the activities that we were looking forward to and planning for this year. We still want to have something. I think we can still do some social distancing activities where we can still have folks come out, we can still celebrate and sort of acknowledge it. But I would look for a scaled down, less dense version of Heritage Days this year. So we just want to acknowledge that and let people know we're not going without, but we just want to make sure we're acting responsibly for our celebration.
Great. And date-wise, we're staying on the same schedule?
That is correct. What we're looking for is perhaps a 2 items, maybe an online sort of thing like this, or we're definitely looking at the idea of having some celebratory fireworks display, something like that. So we'll have more details coming up.
Great. I want to do a quick sound check. Are you able to talk to us, Ralph? You still need to hit your unmute, I believe.
We're not
Ralph-
hearing anything,
Ralph was trying to call.
How about now?
There.
Oh, there we go.
Great,
Okay.
we
Okay.
have you. Are there any other members of the select board that would like to add anything? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to town staff reports. So Eric, I'll turn it over to you for anything you have, plus obviously we have the treasurer's report this meeting.
Yeah, I'll try to run through it fairly quickly, but we have had quite a few weeks in between our last meeting, and a lot's happened. So I'm happy to report on a number of different areas, and I'll try to be brief. I will start by talking about maintenance and infrastructure. Work is progressing very well on the fire station and library projects. I really couldn't be much happier with how that's gone. The support that I've had from the select board and town staff, and also just say that we did have some additional work done throughout this. Ralph's going to give a bit more of a detailed update on the physical work that's happening, and if you have questions on any of that are supplemental, or if you have any questions on the financial side of it as we go through this, please let me know. But Ralph gets to go on that one. We have received several proposals for drainage, culvert, and shoulder repair, and those will be discussed later on this evening. Anna Carl is joining us for that discussion when we do get to the RFP for that project. And I just want to thank Anna for all the time and effort that she put into this, because she really did lead very much this process up to including the site visits and the getting the RFP put together and put on the website. So it's been, I think, a really good experience for her. And I appreciate the work that she's put into that. We will not be pursuing any paving yet. Normally we would be putting out an RFP, and actually this meeting in May is when we typically select a paving proposer or contractor for spring or summer work. We've discussed this with the road committee, and also I've had some direction from the board, select board, and also the planning, the budget committee. And it does seem as though we're better off waiting and seeing what our financial condition is before we move forward with any aggressive work. That being said, we're still pursuing a number of maintenance projects on the roads, particularly striping will be happening this summer. Also, we will be pursuing our usual maintenance activities like brush cutting, pothole repair, and all that. So we do have all those things continuing to happen despite a bit of a deferral on paving, at least until we have a better idea of where we are financially. All of the heavy load restrictions have been removed from the town roads. That's paved and gravel, and grading of the gravel roads has started last week. John Cushing got that underway for us. Our annual roadside cleanup is going on all through the month of May. Instead of cleanup day, it's cleanup May, and I want to thank Dennis for his help in getting that out, and Catherine as well, making that happen. We do have materials available at the transfer station, bags for collecting trash. Also, we have grabbers and those little things for picking up materials if you don't want to grab them with your own hands. And you just talk to an attendant and they can provide that material for you. Anybody that's interested in helping out, we still do have a number of roads that we can that are available for volunteers to work on. If you go to the town website, we have a link there, but also feel free to just reach out to myself or anybody in the town office, and we can help with getting that going. The permit process for the DEP for the Torsi Pond Dam was initiated a couple weeks ago, and we actually got positive news back that they don't believe that we have to do a full permit. We don't likely have to go before the Army Corps of Engineers with an application, and that's going to make it much more likely for us to be able to complete this project this summer as opposed to the fall, with less of an administrative burden to boot. So very pleased with that. There was a change in state legislation that loosened up some of those requirements for us. So that's a very positive sign. Anna, Carl, and I had a Zoom meeting with a company that works on LED street light replacement and conversion. This is the company that provided us with our initial estimate, and it was a very good meeting, very productive, and we're looking at basically, with this company, a 4-year return on investment, which is pretty striking for a project of that scope. Basically, we're in a good spot right now because we only have 37 streetlights. That's something that any one of these companies could knock out in a couple days, and so being a little bit smaller actually helps us fit into people's schedules. And we are talking with this company, but also we likely will want to pursue some kind of an RFP process, although the company that we met with has done the work for pretty much everybody in Kennebec County. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't go through the exercise anyway. And the last piece Catherine alluded to is that I swear winter maintenance is done. We're not going to plow anything else. We're done. So we'll see if that prediction holds true. Moving on to the transfer station. The JCB backhoe is working out exceptionally well up there. It is truly the right sized piece of equipment. We've been able to do a lot of work with it that we probably would have struggled with the old backhoe just because of some of the fatigue issues that it had. But overall, it's been working out exceptionally well, been able to manage all the tasks that they put it to. And the staff have been fully trained by professionals and also have a memo in place to go over my expectations on how that equipment's to be used and operated at the facility. Next one I have working at the budget for the transfer station in order to make room so we can have a bit of a shelter put in place. I'd say there's about a 50% chance we're going to get that done this year. We do have available funds, but time and resources are a question. We're looking at something of a pole barn or something kind of built into the embankment down below by where the shingles container is, using some of those concrete slag blocks that you see people using for their salt and sand sheds. It's a great way to build up a really solid 3 to 4 feet of elevation, and then you can put your 8-foot 2-bys on top of that or 4-bys on top of that and actually come up with a pretty decent structure. So we're looking at that as an option. I'd like to make it happen, but again, there's no guarantee on that. Replacement of the MSW compactor is scheduled for the last week in May, and we've been working to get that done, but finally have a estimated window, and I have a fair amount of confidence that we'll actually realize that, and we've coordinated with transfer station staff and that company to make sure that Atlantic Recycling, to make sure that we have everything in order to make sure that happens during that last week in May. We are working on scheduling a household hazardous waste collection. We talked about that a little bit last week, or not last week, last month. But we've had a small change in time. I think originally I had said 10 to 12 or 10 to 2, but now we're looking at a time on July 25th of 8 to noon. That way we can catch everybody that comes in the morning, and we might be able to even give them opportunity to come back after if they don't realize that we're having the event. However, our outreach on this is going to be probably the best we've had on any activity at the transfer station because of that attendant booth. My expectation is that everybody going through that booth over the next month will be getting a flyer detailing what materials we accept, when the event's going to be, and on the flip side will be the registration form. So we can catch a lot of people and give them full information, which as I've said before, is just something we've never been able to do before at the transfer station. So very pleased with that. We do have more information forthcoming about what that's going to entail, but we're planning on having additional activities there, drug collection, paper shredding, all kinds of stuff. So we really want to make the most of that day. We are still not accepting paints and plastic film at the transfer station as a result of third-party changes at the transfer station. So we would love to collect that stuff, but we can't right now. So our request to residents is that they save it for later. because we will begin accepting that once these restrictions are lifted by the programs that we're working with. So that wraps up the transfer station.
Eric, just so
Yes.
you know, we did get the paint boxes back at the transfer station last
Oh,
week.
awesome.
So
awesome.
we have 2 of those. They brought them in. Clean
That's
Harbor is on it.
Fantastic. That's great news. Yeah, I hadn't heard that. So thank you, Anna.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I just ran through a lot. Any questions on that before I go through my last section?
No, well, please complete the report.
All right. Administration and personnel, we are working on a plan to reopen the town office and library in June. Over the course of this month, we've started to slowly change things at the town office, and we will be making changes additionally throughout the month to test the waters, find out what density feels right, and see how we can best do that. Anna's working on some not PVC, plexiglass screens, so we can have those physical barriers in place that are necessary. I fully expect that we'll be able to open up with restrictions in June when the time comes, and do so safely. We've had good success so far at all of our facilities in maintaining safety, and I think that we certainly will be able to continue that, especially in the town office, which people really do want to get back into. The next item I have is the rec board and beach programming, summer programming. We are working also to get the beach open this summer. Of course, like anything else, there will be restrictions, but the rec board's been fantastic, meeting whenever we need to go over plans, talk about YMCA proposal for swim lessons. We're very much orienting towards being able to open, soft open in June, and then have swim lessons and other programming in July. All of this dependent, of course, upon continued success with the response the state of Maine's had to the coronavirus. But we're working that direction, and it's been a great team helping out with that. The last item on that is we have a survey going out on swim lessons. So if anybody has an interest in having their kids do swim lessons, they should reach out to either myself or the town office or any member of the rec board, and we can ensure that people get the information on how to sign up. If we're going to be doing it, it's kind of a critical mass thing. We want to have 30, 40 parents respond or families respond. So we know that we have some possibility of running a program that won't be a total financial washout. It will be several, $3,000 to $5,000 to run that program, but we can recoup most or all of that if we have the right level of participation. So that's kind of a caveat there. Last couple items, I'm very pleased to announce that Logan Watts is going to be our new seasonal grounds assistant. He'll be working with Ben and Anna to keep the cemeteries and the roads in good shape for us, and he's been great, great so far. But he'll be pretty much full time in the next couple of weeks for the summer season. And the last item I have relates to our code officer position. I did make the announcement that Travis was taking a job much closer to home, and I am pleased to say that we have interviews this week jointly with the town of Wayne to pursue a position that would be more or less split between the two towns. And I'm excited about this because this is one of those areas we've been looking at interlocal cooperation and cost savings for quite a while. Also being able to offer the stability of a position that's more than just a couple days a week. We'll be able to offer about 4 days a week plus some additional time for meetings with pretty competitive wages and benefits. If that's a direction that the successful applicant would like to head, we could do either a higher rate of pay without benefits, or find some arrangement that works for everybody. So I wanted to report that Travis is still working for us 1 day a week, but he's getting to the end of what he can do. But I wanted to just report that we're making great progress, and we're doing it together on that one item. So that's my report. Apologize if it was rambling, but there's been a whole lot happening in town in the last 4 weeks.
Are you going to cover the treasurer's report?
I certainly can, yeah.
Let's just do a really brief overview. Everybody had the opportunity to see it in advance. If there's any questions on it, they can be asked after your very brief overview.
Sure. So the message in brief is coronavirus finally showed up. Our revenues are down for the month by 50%. For the year, we're still in very good shape because we do budget very conservatively, and we've had higher than expected revenues. Expenses are about on par. We've had a few additional expenses for coronavirus response, technology-related purchases, probably a couple $1,000s there, several $1,000s in PPE for the fire department. But all that said, most of that should be able to be reimbursed. I did attend a training for FEMA emergency response reimbursement, and we should be able to get about 80% of that paid for. So that's a positive. Back to the other side of this, which is the loss in revenues. I do expect that most of those revenues are deferred and not completely lost. Where we're seeing things not coming in is in motor vehicle excise tax and on what was the other one? Tax payments. Tax payments, I think, are in large part because people just aren't coming into the office unless they have a need that can't be fulfilled online, and a lot of people just don't want to pay their taxes online. So I do expect we'll get 90% of those missing revenues at some point, but unfortunately it likely won't be until next year, in large part because with respect to motor vehicle excise tax, we won't start getting that in until folks until after the 1 month after that emergency declaration's ended, and we're probably going to have to spend some money to send out reminders and let people know that, hey, you can start registering your vehicles now. You can start paying that excise tax. So we'll have to work a little bit harder for it, but I do believe we'll be able to get most of that revenue back, with the expectation, of course, that some people just won't be able to pay, and we'll have to deal with that.
May I ask a question?
Please do.
I haven't read closely enough on the governor's order, but I believe the state of emergency, at least for the governor's powers, is still in effect through August 31st at the earliest. Does anyone know?
I thought that it had
August 31st?
Yeah, I thought it was through the end of the month, through the end of May.
Yeah, her powers, I believe, do, in other words, the power to extend, format the emergency or respond to the emergency differently are still in place as far as I know. But the actual emergency declaration goes through the end of this month.
Okay, because she's made all sorts of plans for reopening and limiting crowd size and so on that go through August 31st. So I imagine they go hand in hand. So it may be quite a while.
The emergency, if you go on the governor's webpage, the emergency orders are a number of different orders. So there will still be some orders that will affect businesses. There will be some orders that will affect crowd sizes, for example. But the state of emergency that basically applies to us in terms of motor vehicle deference and things of that nature runs through the end of this month. There's absolutely no guarantee that it would not be extended.
Okay.
These things have a sunset on them. Yeah,
Right.
Each one.
I just thought it would be pertinent for people to know what the current status is so they can plan ahead, that if it does expire at the end of May, then July 1st, you will need to have your cars registered.
Right. And I mean, obviously we will let people know through our website probably any changes on that. We do have a COVID page, but we'll have to keep that up to date. The only thing I would add to the Treasurer's report is, Eric, I think we should start thinking about the exercise of doing a forecast for the end of the year. So that would be the final quarter forecast. Maybe I can catch up with you on that later, but I think probably seeing that now in terms of what we expect on the expenses wrap up, and maybe even on the revenues, we'll have to do a couple different models. But I think it would behoove us to do that.
Yeah, worthwhile.
I'll move on to boards, committees, commissions, and departments. So I want to thank the Solid Waste and Recycling Committee for their minutes of January 15th and March 19th, 2020. I want to thank the Cemetery Committee minutes of for providing their minutes for February 19, 2020. With that, are there any members of the public who would like to address the Select Board? This is time you take it off of mute and speak up if you have anything to say. And if not, I'm going to move on. Okay. I'm interruptible to come back to that if for some reason we need to. We'll discuss old business. I think a lot of that, the local COVID-19 response, was probably covered in your report, Eric. But would you like to provide a little bit more of an update?
No, I think that we've really generally covered it. For the last 6 weeks, we've been working closely with staff to make sure that we're meeting the state requirements and the federal guidelines when it comes to the coronavirus response and proper safety measures. So the staff have been very engaged in that, and I really appreciate their support in making all of that happen safely. It's been really strange, and I'm looking forward to kind of getting back to normal at least a little bit in June, bringing some more staff in on a more regular basis into the office, and certainly getting the public back where we can talk to them face to face in some way is going to be positive. So, I guess there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, and we're working to get there.
Great. Any questions for Eric on that? Like I said, he did cover a lot of it in his staff report. Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. And so in front of us is 2113, which is to consider the award of spring ditching, culvert, and road repair work. So I'll go ahead and flip that over to you, Eric. I'm assuming that we certainly had copious information within the packet. What was it, like 50 pages of the packet?
You guys got everything.
We got everything. It took a while to try to do the right due diligence with it, but I'm hoping because there was so much information, I'm hoping you're also coming forward with a recommendation. So the floor is yours.
Great, thanks. Well, as I said before, Anna had kind of led this process. One of the more recent efforts she's made to manage a project like this. So I'm actually just going to pass it right along to Anna and let her talk about the process and where we came out with a recommendation, who was involved, all that.
And I'm going to thank her right up front for that too, and probably on the back side as well. So thank you. Go ahead, Anna.
Thanks, Bruce. Can everybody hear me?
We can.
Okay, good. All right. So at our pre-bid meeting, we had 6 people show up to the pre-bid meeting. That was not mandatory. And we had 7 bids come in. So a few of the people that showed up didn't put bids in, but the one person that did put a bid in on the low end that we're considering to award the bid to was J. Pratt Construction. He did call a few different times in regards to questions on my RFP document, making sure that he had numbers correct on driveway addresses, sizing, and was pretty good about communicating with me in regards to any questions that he had. I had done quite a bit of math on especially Rat Mill Hill Road, which was one of the major projects on the RFP as far as adding road gravel and some ditching that needs to happen, because if anybody drives that, they know what I'm talking about. With that being said, we received 7 bidders in this. The prices did vary. I will be upfront and honest and did not put in my total tonnage amount for the material that I had estimated on Rat Mill Hill Road. So that was a big consideration in where bidders were bidding. We did ask for the lump sum for tonnage, but we did not give the total tonnage amount. So I did contact most of the bidders. One of them I was not able to get a hold of, and that was St. Lauren and Son. But the other ones I was able to get a hold of and be able to do the math out to make the bids very comparable. And that still led J. Pratt Construction with the lowest bid. With the total of my tonnage and what his cost is to install it, plus all the culverts in town that we had listed, we are looking at $57,878.
And before you go on in, I just want to clarify, that's for the town road work, not for the town farm forest, correct?
Correct. Town forest was an add-on. That one I believe we'll be awarding separately. And Bruce Hunter is here with that, and we work together on adding that into my RFP to make the documents a little bit easier. But yeah, simply what I'm talking about are the town roads, culverts, some paved driveways, and Rat Mill Hill Road.
So the recommendation before us is for to award this contract to J. Pratt Construction for the road work in the amount of $57,878.
Yes, and that includes
do you
our
have a-
material.
And that includes material.
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on that?
I
Just
do.
a clarification on the material. So the material cost is what we had estimated based on our tonnages. So that actually wouldn't be a cost paid by or to them. The cost of material would be incurred by the town. So a
That's the
little bit of a
30
nuance there. but,
3187.
there we go.
Okay.
Can someone repeat that, please?
It's $3,187.10. It's the 406.
No, that's for the town forest project. Bruce.
Sorry. So it's the 750 tons. Is that
It's
correct?
750 tons, and that's $7,687.50 of the type A material from Pike.
Thank you for that correction.
So it'll be the 7,600 plus the 57,800.
No, that's included in the 57 is my assumption if we're at a bottom line.
Yeah, the 57, if you're looking at the document, the 57,000, and I probably should have broken it up a little bit better. The 57,000 and above is J. Pratt. The lines underneath are for the town forest project that are separate costs. If you notice on the left side, I have the contractor, the estimated tonnage, and the lump sum for that separately.
So Catherine,
I thought Eric just said that the tonnage was not included in that 57,000.
That's not his cost, that's the town's cost. That's what we pay for it.
But that is already included in the 57,000.
I added that in so we would have a total of what it would cost the town. But I put the total in there, $7,687.50 is what the town's gonna pay out separately to Pike.
Okay.
to Pratt.
No, to Pike.
The Pike Industry.
Oh, yes, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So is the bid for 50,000 something then?
Yes.
Okay. And
Yeah,
that's the number we want to approve.
right, and
sorry,
my
Catherine.
question, sorry.
Please
This is
go.
hard. What did we have budgeted to do this work?
Well, we had, I don't think we really had a clear picture. We were thinking around $40,000 to $60,000. We expected and will be pulling some of this out of the contingency fund for road work. And that was how we had originally pursued this. So we do have a $250,000, $300,000 somewhere in that range in those reserve accounts. And so we have, I think right now, and I talked about this last week, I think it was around $20,000 currently. So we'd be looking at taking 30 to 40 out of the reserve accounts to complete this work.
Thank you.
Bruce,
So,
I'm looking at this spreadsheet here, and are we splitting the bids out? Because I'm looking at J. Pratt, for example, as being the low bid for certain streets, and then St. Lawrence, low bidder for another. Are we just going to go exclusively with J. Pratt, or are we going to piecemeal the bid?
It's split into two pieces. One is the road work and one is the town forest. We're not more finely splitting it. And I think if we were to be doing that, we would probably need to go back to the bidders because they have, some of them look at road lengths a little differently and how they approach and haul materials. And so you need to look at the entire package. I think that they then have 4 different bidders, for example, doing different streets in town, then they lose efficiency.
So that 57,878 is inclusive, even though some of the roads that Pratt had bid on were not the low bid. But
That's correct.
in aggregate, it is the low bid.
That's correct.
Okay.
And so, Eric, am I correct in saying that the amount that Pratt would be paid is $50,190.50?
I don't have a total on that.
Well, what I did is I just took the 57 and subtracted the 7,687.50.
I just want to double check here. The Pratt, did they have a per ton cost, or did they give us a flat rate for the 750?
He was $15.01 per ton.
Okay, I see that. Yeah. So again, because the amount of material we're putting down is going to be variable, the bid was, or at least for Rat Mill Hill Road, was bid at a unit price for delivering the materials and installing the materials. So that $50,000 would be an estimate if they delivered exactly 750 tons. So what my recommendation, I guess, would be that we accept Pratt's bid with the exception of the town farm forest for the items that they proposed, recognizing that the cost to the town in aggregate would be around $57,000 or $50,000 for labor and some materials, and then $7,000 additional for the gravel for Rat Mill Hill Road, if that makes sense.
I understand it.
Yeah, I understand.
So can I get a motion to that, or would you like me to make the motion from the chair?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to move that we accept J. Pratt Construction for the road work in the estimated amount of $57,878 with final numbers to be dependent on some materials that would be expected within a variance. Do I have a second? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. If anybody doesn't think my motion is precise enough, they're welcome to make an amendment. But is there any discussion on it? We'll proceed then with the vote. Ms. Woodson,
Yes.
Ms. Sammons,
Yeah,
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mr. Eno,
Yes.
and Mr. Burgoyne votes yes. I almost said Ms. Price, but I'm certainly glad I didn't do that. We'll move on to the town forest.
Sure. So I'll just say that this was split out as at a recommendation of multiple parties. Anna, the road committee, conservation certainly doesn't want to spend twice what they may have otherwise. I'll just say this recommendation came from a few different directions, and I'll leave it there.
I do know Bruce Hunter joined us. Did you want to speak to it, Bruce, at all?
No, I really have no need to. Conservation Commission is recommending they could select Cushing since he's the lowest bid, and I really have no more to say. Thanks, Dan, for helping us understand that the materials weren't included in that. So we'll be
Yes. You're welcome.
we'll be looking at other places in our budget to meet the cost, but that'll be just fine.
Okay, great. I'm ready to take a motion on this as well, so we can discuss it.
I'll make a motion that we accept the bid for Cushing Construction for the Town Farm Forest Project at $8,319.10, which includes material costs.
second.
It's been moved and seconded. Does anyone need me to reread the motion? Is there any discussion on the motion, please?
Do we need to make any sort of a caveat like you did on your motion that the material amount may vary?
And that's kind of always the case, if you will, when you come to road work. So I think
Okay.
anytime we've accepted, you know, for example, a striping or a sweeping or a road work thing, if we, you know, have an extra quarter mile done or something like that, those variances do show up and get reported to us. So I think we're moving it forward with that understanding. Does anybody else not have that, share that understanding? Okay, great. I'll call the roll then. Ms. Woodson,
Yes.
Ms. Sammons,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mr. Eno,
Yes.
Mr. Burgoyne votes yes. So now we'll move. Thank you, Anna, very much. I appreciate you doing, working hard on this.
You'll see us busy around town. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on
Thanks, Anna.
to, excuse me, we'll move on to 20114, which is the fire station and library building project. And actually, Ralph has sort of been the select board not sort of, we asked him to be the liaison to those projects with us, and he's gone to the site quite a bit and been a good asset to Eric in his process. So I thought I would ask Ralph at least to kick us off with a little bit of an update on the project.
Okay, very, very briefly, Eric covered a lot of ground in his opening report, but as most of you can see, we are up and out of the ground, footings and walls. Walls are stripped. Next step is the pouring the slabs. Mr. Cushing was there today setting the footing drains. I've been very impressed with the teamwork that's been involved, answering a number of questions in terms of pipe spec and sleeves for holes in the wall for those pipes and placement of rigid insulation. All of those questions have been resolved in a timely way, and I would say mostly to our satisfaction. The library roof was supposed to get underway today with the stripping. Nothing has happened. I'm not sure why, but hopefully it begins this week. There was some discussion as far as the firehouse is concerned about maybe repurposing the existing range hood in the commercial kitchen. And I believe the decision has been made that that is not a satisfactory alternative and will probably cost more to retrofit than buying something new. Talking with Eric about that today, we're probably looking at an additional cost of about $1,200 for same. I think basically that is about it, with the exception of the library. At our last construction meeting, we agreed that we would do some repointing and waterproofing of the chimneys to prevent water wicking into that old brickwork after the new roof is on, which makes eminent good sense. I'm not sure that there was a dollar figure that in the original cost estimate, but surely it can't be cost prohibitive, and it's a good defensive step to take care of that so we don't have interior water damage after a new roof is in place. And Eric is essentially the clerk of the works, so I'm going to defer to him in terms of explaining what the change orders to date have been, what our payments to date, our progress payments are, and where we may be in terms of our contingency liquidity for the end of this fiscal year.
Thank you, Eric.
All right. So we did start off this project with a fairly good assessment of where we were looking at both expense and revenues. We reviewed the project. The select board awarded the base bid plus 2 alternates. to move forward. Since that time, I did add an additional alternate for the library roof, the lower small roof, at a cost of, I believe, $5,000 to $7,000. And that allows us to have a metal roof on the entire structure, not just on the main component of the building. So very nice from an aesthetic perspective, but also quite important because one of our main collections is actually housed in that annex. And so having the metal roof on it makes all the sense in the world, considering that the shingles are, similar condition. We probably would have paid a couple $1,000s to have it reshingled with asphalt anyway. So that was one of the changes. We also had a number of change orders that were not necessarily anticipated. We have had, and I'll try to summarize them here, get the right piece of paper. For the library, I think we had one change order, and that, yes, we did have one additional change order for a little less than $1,000. I'm trying to remember what that was for. The actual reshingling or the metal roof was $5,000 and change. That's right. But there was the truss. The truss system had to be modified slightly due to the fact that the dimensions on the chimneys were not 100% accurate. So we had to spread the trusses out a little bit, and that came with an additional cost for material and design work. So there was a $1,000 change order for that, and then the $5,000, as I noted, for the roof. Moving on to the fire station, we've had a couple of change orders there. The first was for a change to the framing. We had to have a small change to the framing, and that one came in. Let me see that. Where is it? It's right here. A $2,000 change for the framing. And we also had a $7,000 change order. And let me see if I could find that one right here. I've got a whole notebook and I'm trying to make sure I cover everything. The first major change order of the $7,000 included some additional foundation work on the slab that was not originally intended. Also, we had to add a layer of drywall that was almost $5,000, and that was the one that kind of caught me most off guard. But in order to meet fire code, we do have to have double layer of 5/8 drywall, not a single layer. And so that was one where the plans just didn't call it out and it wasn't bid or wasn't carried by the contractor. So that $7,000 one was a kind of aggregate of a few different items, but the big one was the drywall and the foundation change. All told, we've moved through, including the change orders and the addition of that alternate 5 for the roof on the library, right around $22,000 in change orders. We started off this process with a capacity of around $33,000, $34,000. So we have roughly $10,000 left that we can apply towards additional work. Ralph mentioned the ceiling of the concrete, or the mortar and the brick of those old chimneys. That I wouldn't expect to be more than a couple $1,000s unless there's some major repointing necessary. We also have that hood, $1,200 there just for the piece of equipment, plus probably some peripherals as well. So we're at the edge of what we can accomplish, and certainly of what I would feel comfortable expending this fiscal year without knowing if and what we'll be receiving if the voters approve the additional spending that we put in place for buffer and things like furniture and interior work for the library and all of that. So I think we're in a decent spot. We've accomplished a lot. I think we've been very smart about how we've spent that money where we had a choice. Unfortunately, we had probably $15,000 that wasn't our choice. But that's expected. That's why we chose the low bidder that we did, so we would have some room for this type of thing to happen. So as we progress, I'm sure we'll have more change orders, and we'll follow the same path of deliberating on them and trying to make the right choice that we can afford.
Thank you for that update. We're going to just see if there are any questions. And I guess I'll just start off with one that I have. In the packet, we had 2 application certificates for payment, the certification for some payments.
Yes.
And is this S.J. Wood's form?
This is S.J. Wood's form. It's actually an AIA, or the Association of Architects, standard template. But,
we don't need any additional explanation, or I don't. I just thought it was very good, and it was very illustrative of what's been done, and I really appreciated having those payment certification pages. They were very helpful to me to understand kind of where we are. So thank you.
I'll pass that along.
Yep. Any other questions for Eric or Ralph on the project to date? We'll be getting continual updates on this, obviously, as we go through and into next year. So again, okay.
I just want to say that I think it's great that there's progress that's visible. I think that always helps the taxpayers to feel that things they voted on are happening, and when you can see it, it makes a difference.
Yeah, when you get into things like double drywall in order to meet the fire code in a fire station, you better do it. Okay, we'll move on to 2115, which is to consider a letter from the Wayne Select Board regarding the transfer station. And so the letter I received from the Wayne Select Board, which was addressed to me, so I wanted to share it and have it discussed at this meeting, really was about face coverings by our staff at the transfer station, which in a way probably segues into what our general expectations are in terms of workers and interaction with public and so forth. But I do want to get back to the town of Wayne in a fairly timely manner and have this discussed this evening. So with that, and I have some opinions on this, but with that, were there any questions or thoughts, or where do we want to start with this?
Well, I put out something today that I thought was informational, so I'll just highlight that for the public, if I may.
Please.
There were several things stated in the letter that I take exception to. They stated that the Solid Waste Committee decided not to require town staff to wear face coverings. I just wanted it noted that the Solid Waste and Recycling Committee, according to the interlocal agreement, is an advisory committee and cannot make any requirements or decisions. They also stated that they're a partner in the management and oversight of the transfer station, and the interlocal agreement specifically states that they are not. It says, and I quote, "In order that the management of the station shall be as efficient and small as possible, the parties agree that it shall be the responsibility of the town of Readfield to administer and operate the station." So I just wanted us to have the language that came from the agreement that all 3 towns signed. And then the last point is more of a comment on mine. They state that it's difficult to maintain physical distancing measures, and they want staff to wear face coverings. And I think all the materials that were presented earlier in the packet show that the transfer station manager, as well as the town manager, has taken extraordinary steps to protect the public and the staff. So there we go.
Other comments on this?
Well, at the transfer station, they are keeping a 6-foot distance from everyone, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And face masks aren't necessary if you're not closer than 6 feet.
Well, and we have one attendant who's in the booth at all times, so they're certainly not near the public.
Yeah.
But they do roll down their window and interchange with public from time to time. Eric, do you have any perspective you want to add into this before I weigh in?
Sure, yeah. Well, I just say that, I do appreciate the town of Wayne as a, I mean, certainly they're a customer. I just don't like the letter. I think it takes a little bit of, I just don't like the direction that it took. I think that the staff have done an exceptional job. I think that they met or exceeded state requirements, federal guidelines. The select board certainly has the ability to get involved and make decisions in any area of the town. One thing I very much enjoyed this select board doing is giving me the freedom to work with staff without much, I won't say much oversight, but without much intervention. And I see this as kind of an attempt to just push that aside a little bit by the Wayne Select Board. And I know I probably ought to be a little bit more open to it, but it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. That being said, I get their perspective, but I also don't like the lack of specificity. It's a very general statement about their druthers without any real basis. And that's what one of the things about it that I didn't necessarily respond to very well, but I understand why it's here. I appreciate the board considering it, and I'd appreciate if you could just leave it be.
Do we have other
Can you jump
comments?
in, Bruce?
Please do.
As Eric says, appreciate their input, but there is plenty of social distancing there. And from time to time, I have noticed staff wearing those masks. I would think as long as we're in compliance with social distancing regulations provided by the state, that we shouldn't have to mandate this step. And we should certainly say, we'll pass your concerns on, but this is a discretionary thing as far as our employees are concerned, given the fact that we believe we're in compliance with the way we should be behaving up there.
Any other comments?
Guess that Eric is the manager there. His call.
Yep. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and give my perspective.
Bruce, Dennis has his hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Dennis.
I just want to say that I read this letter and it's fine. I think it's fine. I think it's very, very thoughtful. I think they're absolutely right. I think wearing a mask helps. I don't know. I can't. I'm not a scientist. I'm not smart enough to know, but I know that when I use my chainsaw, I wear stuff that will hopefully keep me from getting cut. Do I still get cut? Sure, if I'm an idiot, but I like to have the protection. What I just want to remind everyone is that sometimes we bristle when we get called out for an idea that maybe we're not doing something exactly right. And I think that's happening here. It's hard to be criticized or called out for something that you think we're doing a great job with. And I just want to point out that I trust unequivocally the leadership of Eric, Karen, Mike, and Ben, who I know work at the town transfer station, so that this is less about a mandate and more about trust in the employees, that we hire people who always have the best interest of the public in mind. And so whether they wear masks or not is to me beside the point. When they are helping the public, are they being mindful of safety, OSHA-induced safety things, which I'm certain that Eric is double checking and triple checking, And also, do people feel comfortable when they go to the transfer station? I guess to me, this would carry more pause for me if this were coming from a concerned group of citizens, perhaps rather than a sort of legislative body. But I want people to know that I hear this. And hopefully when the town office reopens and when we have closer contact that is not outdoor based, we are able to have masks in the building. We are able to take better steps. But
absolutely.
I guess to
Absolutely.
me, I want to make sure that we understand, and it's not just lip service. You're right. We know masks help, but we feel like what is happening at the transfer station is within guidelines. So thank you.
Thank you. I tend to agree with Dennis on the bristling thing. I look at our arrangement with both of the towns that are our customers as still being a collaboration, and so they may have, perhaps misstated in their letter a little bit of the relationship or whatever. That doesn't really matter to me. In addition to your point, Dennis, about a group of concerned citizens, my assumption is that the Wayne Select Board is acting or reacting to a group of citizens in their town. I think it would be wise for us to have a face mask policy at the transfer station. That's my personal opinion. And I kind of base that on what I read in these documents that were supplied in terms of having face coverings in public settings where physical distances are difficult to maintain. And by maintaining, I'm looking at this with people just moving around. You're called over to a truck. You're asked to take a look at this muffler that you're trying to drop off, and so on and so forth. So my feeling, quite frankly, is that if you're out on the floor, so to speak, delivering services, that it is protective. And this is what we have to realize with face masks. It's not about protecting the employee, although it is to some extent. It is protecting the public and the perceptions of the public as they arrive at the transfer station and do business with us. One of the things that's set aside in the guidance documents that I read in the packet, we're talking about public settings, and one of them, this is on page 24 or 25, mentions outdoor spaces such as playgrounds, busy parking lots, and other areas such as lines and takeout service. Obviously, they're talking about businesses here, where public typically gathers in a smaller space. And we're dealing with yes, the transfer station is many acres, okay, but the servicing area is people moving around. And so my own personal opinion is that we should probably have any time that we know that distancing is going to be difficult to maintain, that a face mask is used. That's my own personal opinion again. I'm willing to make a motion to that regard. I think it might fail tonight. I don't know. But I think that ought to be our policy, and that the idea is that if you know you're moving into a situation where, yep, this is where I ought to don my face mask. I'm stepping out of the booth now, or I'm opening the window of the booth and talking to people 4 feet away from me or whatever. I think that's a time you should have a face mask on. We should be, setting an example in protecting the public. Now, I mean, maybe with the booth, we'll be able to have a plexiglass and a little, area where you can kind of speak through or whatever. But that's serves the same function, if you will, as a face mask. So that's my perspective. I welcome some additional reaction to that before I perhaps make a motion.
Bruce?
Yes.
as opposed to a motion perhaps, why don't we ask Eric to review the policy and maybe adjust the parameters for use and see if we can't accommodate Wayne's concerns and affect the kind of change that they think they need and maybe we ought to be doing.
I'm more than willing to do that. I mean, I don't need to have a motion on the floor necessarily to do that. I just want to be heard that my perspective is that I think and I'm not going to call it a complaint. I'm going to call it a partnership observation. Okay, really being creative there with the word, I suppose. But and they're looking out for their citizens too as we look out for ours. I want to be able to answer this letter that we're giving it a very high level of due diligence, and that if we do indeed make some decisions, and I would say that this is something we would review in the very short term. I can't in all righteousness, if you will, put this off to the June select board meeting to then have something in front of you policy-wise that you would approve or disapprove. So yes, giving Eric some oversight in that, and maybe me following up with him and then writing a letter back to them saying what we've considered and so forth is the way to go.
I'll just say I would prefer probably a direction aside from reviewing the policy, because I get the comment about bristling. I mean, I've thought about that. I recognize that I looked at that and said, I don't like that. And I tried to understand why I felt that way. And a lot of it did have to do with the just some of the assumptions being made. But outside of that, I really do feel that PPE is absolutely required in circumstances where it's either required or prudent. The direction we've had, again, from the state, from the federal government, we're meeting that or exceeding that. Our parking area is small, but it's still, we have no more than 5 people in there at any given time. I mean, the queue line, yeah, there's a lot of cars back there, but they're in their cars. But once you get to that booth and forward, there's 3 cars and there's 2 attendants, and they're spread out quite well. So I just look at this and say, if it's, I won't say it's not broken, but trying to think of a better analogy, but I believe that we're meeting the expectations, and I have really heard no complaints from anybody or any concerned partner, what was the word you used, Bruce? Observations. I haven't heard that from anybody. All I've heard from staff, from residents, is that they're very pleased that we're operating and operating safely in the environment that we've set up there, which maintains significant distancing. So I guess I'm not planning on modifying the policy much.
Okay, well, I'm very careful to not, if you will, use my own experiences as fodder in an argument. I drove into the transfer station on Friday. I spoke with the attendant in the booth from my truck. We were probably 4 or less feet away, and we spoke for a couple minutes because I have a truck. So the booth attendant was, asking if I had anything in the back of the truck, basically, beyond just typical trash and recycling. So we had a very brief exchange, and he directed, I shouldn't have said that, excuse me. The attendant then directed me to where to park. The other attendant was on the ground there. That attendant had a face mask on. And my point is that within 2 or 3 trips to the recycling bin with a couple of boxes and then some trash and then a piece of metal to throw away, I am socially distanced from that attendant who was masked, which I think is appropriate. I'm beyond 6 feet from that attendant for the 4 minutes I'm in there, probably for 3 minutes of it. But I'm also passing by that person who's also passing by other people and so forth. So that's my personal experience. I think it was, I think the attendant at the booth probably should have been masked. And I'm appreciative that the attendant who was on the floor, if you will, directing things and so forth, was masked, and I appreciated that. So with that, Eric, I guess I'm a little less confident to write back to the town of Readfield of a level of satisfaction that I would have, because basically you're saying, and I don't mean this to be critical, but you're saying you're not going to modify the policy very much. I think the policy does need modification.
Sure. Yeah, no, and that's, I mean, that's essentially, I mean, I've thought about this a lot. I've thought about the different directions people are coming from this, and, you know, I don't want you to think I'm taking it lightly, because
No,
I certainly have thought a lot about it.
Okay.
I guess I still have a concern, and then I have a suggestion. I appreciate why we're having this discussion, but I want it to remain clear that in order for the transfer station to run efficiently, there has to be a partner who is in charge. And that's how the agreement was laid out. And people can make suggestions and requests, but they need to be understanding of what the interlocal agreement is. Otherwise, I think it's a very slippery slope, because, well, last time I made this suggestion, you listened to me, and now I want you to do this differently and that differently. So I just want to make sure that we're cognizant of that. I think it would be fine maybe to make a suggestion to the transfer station manager that if attendants are not going to be 6 feet away from the public, that they wear a mask.
That's the direction they have right now. So I need to apparently talk to the staff again about what distancing is appropriate. So that's.
Because what you said, Bruce, is what should not occur. People should not be within 6 feet of you without a mask on, because that's what the requirement is. So I'm very comfortable that we make that direction, that that the transfer station manager ensure that town employees are wearing a mask if they are within 6 feet of anyone.
Right, and that kind of extends to the direction of the likelihood that you're going to be within 6 feet of somebody. So, for example, if you are in the booth and vehicles are pulling up 4 or 3 feet away from the booth, you really need to operate on the expectation that you are going to be in within 6 feet of people. I think the same is true. I keep saying on the floor because my background is with production facility.
Yeah.
So if you're on the floor and you're just moving around, you're just going to be interacting with customers left and right. I do hear you, Catherine, in terms of who's in charge, if you will, of the transfer station, who has that designated role. But I do think it's very responsible for us to be reactive to a customer, and
I agree.
And yes, sometimes we do intake things that we need to change for a customer. I will say that I want to just I cannot speak on behalf of the select board, but of Wayne. But just like us, we're all grappling with new stuff here, and so's Eric, by the way. So it's it's all new territory for us. The number of pandemics in my 60 some odd years of life that I've been in, as far as I know, that have resulted in emergencies and so on and so forth, is one. And I'm at some point in the beginning of that, I guess. So it is difficult. So I'm willing not to make a motion and to follow the suggestion that Eric revisit the policy. I do think we probably will be, as we open up the town office and the library for that matter. I think, we will have to look at those masking and those requirements in regards to those kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, I can say right up front, Bruce, that in the town office and in the library, I'm expecting that both staff and residents will be required to wear masks. I think that's entirely appropriate in that context, and certainly no issues there.
And
Yeah.
that would also hold true at the fire station as well, which is a town building, correct?
Yeah,
Well-
if they were doing trainings, Lee has essentially stopped those for now just because of the risk. So, yeah.
I will say this, I mean, I talk to Lee weekly under our emergency meeting. We have a meeting with Eric every week, actually. And it's just a very brief discussion, an update of any concerns that I might take to the board. That the fire station is really on top of this.
Yeah.
They're just, bang, they're right on top of this. So, and they're very, very in tune of making sure that their staff is protected, because they want to field the largest number of people to any event that needs to be addressed. And so they're being extremely careful. They are concerned about, I think, loss of training time, and but they're working on that. So do we have a sense of the board, or I think probably if I was to bring a motion forward to mandate this, as I would like to write it, it'd probably be a 4-1 vote. We're not going to do that, but we're going to go ahead and revisit the policy to see if there's any place to tighten it up, and if there's any places to discuss the policy as it stands, that we would go ahead and do that with employees, and that I will write a letter to the select board chair, Mr. Welsh, who contacted me regarding that, and I'm happy to share that in advance with whomever on the board it would make sense to do that with, perhaps Catherine and Eric, as a suggestion.
Works for me. Thanks.
That would be great, Bruce. I think that's a great compromise.
Okay, good. Thank you. We'll move on to the Spirit of America Awards and the Volunteer Appreciation Event Planning. So we have a deadline on that, right?
Yeah, it's not arbitrary, but we set a deadline to try to help and encourage people to participate quickly. The May 29th. In the past, we have awarded 1 to 3 of these Spirit of America Awards and recognized people at a special event we hold sometime between May and July. This year, we have to be a bit more creative in how we pursue this, but I certainly feel we have plenty of people in town who are responding to the coronavirus in an exceptional manner, and also to all the other needs that we've had in the town over the past year. And we shouldn't have any trouble getting some nominations put forward. And we will find a way to recognize these Spirit of America recipients as well as the volunteers broadly. We probably won't be doing a brunch in June. Probably not going to happen that way, but I am looking for suggestions if the board has any on how you think we might be able to creatively and fully recognize our many volunteers and the Spirit of America recipients.
I do have a suggestion. Is there a reason that we do it in June? Or I think one time we did it in early July as well.
Yeah, we've done it typically after the town meeting, in order to just take a breath and then celebrate the new appointments, all of those things that happen, and to recognize people that might be retiring from their several 20+ years of service. That usually happens in June when people finish up their terms. So that's more or less why.
That speaks to kind of my suggestion, and it's this. That normally in many years past, and for, as long as I can remember, we used to do this when we had a floor town meeting. We used to do it at town meeting. And so we've moved to some recognition of volunteers with a Volunteers Day that's a little bit wider, and I really, really like that. We did one outside. I remember down at the Keene Field. We did another one on the town beach. We've done a couple of brunches. My suggestion is and I'm just tossing this out, is why not do this at Heritage Days? The town's
Yeah.
There are more people around to perhaps recognize and congratulate people. And I realize that as I make this suggestion, that this might be a little bit of a different year. Okay, so, but it's just a thought for, I mean, we annualized Heritage Days to celebrate the town. Here's a good opportunity to celebrate volunteers and for them to see other people, to also congratulate them other than perhaps just people who might come to the event itself. So it's just a thought.
I like that idea, and at that point in time, we can have gatherings of 49 and less still. So I think Dennis can probably find a way to arrange that.
So you have 3 big pins, 49 in Pen A, 49 in Pen B, 49.
Yes, you can actually do that. That's what graduation requirements are. You can be on 5 different fields, 49 each.
There you go. So that's just a suggestion, some food for thought. However you put this together, I'm sure it's going to work out quite well. Anybody else have any other thoughts or suggestions?
I think it might be nice to, since we've often done this with food, we could have, I don't want to say it here, but we could come up with a little prepackaged item that's sealed, that can be put on a table that someone can pick up as a thank you. Food is always a nice way to celebrate.
Well, and if we did do it at Heritage Days, requirements may be different at that point. We're talking about August. So when I mentioned Heritage Days, I just realized, of course, I'm crashing Dennis's party. So is that a good crash or a bad crash? Dennis?
I think it's absolutely appropriate. And in fact, had everything worked out the way we wanted it, we were hoping to do something in the afternoon where we had a stage that we could, we were going to have some music, and then what we could do is at that stage, then gather people around and say, hey, we're going to do this all together. I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great way to combine multiple things to celebrate our town. I think Heritage Days is a celebration of the town, and what a better way to celebrate than the folks who are active and do stuff. That's what I think the Spirit of America Awards are. So I think that's absolutely appropriate. And if we want to start thinking about that, that's something that I can take into consideration.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to 2117, which is to sign and return the secret ballot warrant public hearing on Thursday, May 28th. This is just kind of a note that we need to get down there and sign something, right? Or did we already sign this?
This is just a note that you need to get down here and sign it. We have to go through this process of first we approve and sign the warrant, then we have to approve and sign the return that the public hearing was properly noticed and posted, verifying that we had Anna go and post that, which I can confirm that she did at multiple places around town. Once this gets done, we would then sign a return on the warrant proper, which is the actual full notice of the town meeting. So this is step 2 out of 3, basically. But yeah, it's ready for folks to sign.
When would you like it signed by?
Sometime this week would be fantastic.
Okay, great. Is there anything else that anybody would like to mention before we close out this meeting?
So just on those dates, we need to sign this form and the warrant that Chris approved earlier. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And
yes.
So what's the best day for us to get that done by so that bills can be paid?
We send checks out on Thursday. We definitely, we already have the one signature we need for payroll. So by Wednesday would be best.
Thank you.
Okay, optimum is Wednesday, and 2 more signatures on the warrants. We'll put those into effect.
I'll be by tomorrow, Eric.
Okay, great. Good, good. May I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion to adjourn.
It's been moved to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Then I'll call the roll on that. Woodson,
Yes.
Sammons,
Yes.
Price,
Yes.
Eno,
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Thank you all very much. Have a good evening. Stay safe.